On February 5, 2026, a Russian Il-78 tanker refueled 3 brand-new Su-57E stealth fighters over the Mediterranean, each worth over $100 million and bound for Algeria. By 8:47 a.m., one of those jets was sitting on a secret Ukrainian-controlled airstrip in Libya, its AESA radar already being stripped out by NATO engineers. How did Ukraine pull off what might be the most audacious aircraft heist in modern military history? The answer involves a ghost swarm of decoys, electronic warfare that turned Russian escorts blind, and a special forces team that had just 11 minutes to extract the most advanced stealth technology Russia has ever built. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. On February 4, 2026, Russian defense contractors celebrated what they thought would be their biggest payday in years. But Ukrainian intelligence had been planning for this moment since the previous summer. The New START treaty between Russia and the United States was set to expire on February 5, 2026, ending the last major nuclear arms control agreement between the two nations. While the treaty focused primarily on nuclear arsenals, its expiration removed key restrictions on Russia's ability to export advanced weapon systems. For Moscow, this meant one thing. They could finally monetize their most advanced stealth fighter without previous constraints. Algeria had already purchased 2 Su-57E fighters in late 2025 for over $200 million as a test run. Russia was counting on delivering 33 more aircraft worth billions in follow-on contracts. The problem was getting them there safely. Turkish airspace was off-limits due to political tensions, and flying through Black Sea corridors would put the formation within range of Ukrainian air defenses. Russia settled on a southern ferry route through Libya, which required a critical mid-air refueling over international waters south of Crete before the final leg to Algeria. General Khalifa Haftar, who controlled eastern Libya, had granted permission to use his air bases for refueling support. Ukrainian intelligence had identified this exact ferry route months earlier. Russian Il-78 tankers would refuel Su-57E formations over the Mediterranean, then continue via Libya. The pattern was predictable and, more importantly, exploitable. Russia desperately needed to complete this sale. International sanctions had crippled other revenue streams, and the Su-57E export program represented one of Moscow's few remaining high-value defense contracts. Without these deals, funding for ongoing military operations would dry up fast. Here's the vulnerability. Mid-air refueling operations require aircraft to fly at reduced speeds and maintain predictable flight paths for safe fuel transfer. The Il-78 tanker would cruise at 25,000 feet and 280 miles per hour with its refueling drogue extended. Each Su-57E would refuel one at a time, while Su-35 escorts maintained a wider orbit. The entire process would take approximately 18 minutes. 18 minutes when Russia's most advanced stealth fighters would be locked into a fixed position, unable to maneuver aggressively. Ukrainian planners knew the exact date Russia would begin ferry operations. But interception alone wouldn't achieve their objective. They needed assets positioned close enough to force a landing, not just shoot down an aircraft. At 5:42 a.m. on February 5th, 4 Ukrainian F-16s lifted off from a dirt airstrip that officially didn't exist. And they weren't alone. The staging point, called LZ Dagger, sat in a remote section of eastern Libya controlled by General Khalifa Haftar's forces. Ukrainian intelligence had spent months building diplomatic backchannels with Libya-based factions, securing permission to use the concealed airstrip network. Group 13 Special Forces had prepared the site in advance, positioning it within striking distance of the Mediterranean ferry route Russia would use. The F-16s were heavily modified for this mission. Each aircraft carried conformal fuel tanks that added an extra 3,500 pounds of fuel, extending their combat radius by 40%. Advanced electronic warfare pods were mounted on wing pylons where air-to-air missiles would normally go. Instead of a full weapons loadout, each F-16 carried 4 ADM-160mm ALD decoys. A Ukrainian C-130 transport aircraft sat hidden at LZ Dagger, engines warm and ready for extraction. The Ukrainian formation approached at low altitude, hugging the wave tops at under 500 feet to stay below the radar horizon. The Russian Il-78 tanker had already begun its refueling operation with 3 Su-57E aircraft at 25,000 feet. Su-35 escorts equipped with powerful Irbis-E radars circled the formation, scanning for threats. Those radars could track 30 targets simultaneously, but they were about to be overwhelmed. At 6:14 a.m., the F-16S released their payload. 16 ADM-160M decoys launched in sequence, each programmed to mimic the exact radar signature and flight profile of a Su-57. On Russian radar screens, what appeared to be a massive formation materialized seemingly out of nowhere. The Su-35 escorts reacted immediately, firing R-77 and R-37M missiles at the perceived threats. Each R-77 cost approximately $400,000, and the R-37M missiles were even more expensive. Russia was expending high-value interceptors on targets that cost a fraction of the price. While the Su-35s focused on the decoy swarm, Ukrainian electronic warfare pods went to work. The EW systems targeted GPS vulnerabilities in Russian navigation equipment, flooding the Su-57's GPS receiver module with fake satellite signals. The cascading errors made navigation systems unreliable without directly hacking flight computers. By the time the Su-35 pilots realized they'd been deceived, the Ukrainian F-16S had positioned themselves between the refueling formation and its planned route south. The Ukrainian pilots had specific orders. Force 1 Su-57E down intact, because what NATO wanted wasn't wreckage. It was working components. At 8:36 a.m., Su-57E No. 3 had a catastrophic fuel probe failure during the refueling attempt. Except it wasn't a failure at all. Ukrainian electronic warfare had targeted the Su-57E's fuel management system, sending false sensor readings that caused the aircraft's flight computer to detect hydraulic pressure loss in the refueling probe. The pilot had no choice but to abort the refueling and declare an emergency on international frequencies. The Russian pilot faced two options: attempt a water landing in the Mediterranean or divert to the nearest airstrip. LZ Dagger was 47 nautical miles away, well within gliding distance if the Su-57E lost power. Ukrainian F-16 immediately positioned themselves alongside the damaged aircraft, broadcasting on guard frequency that they were providing emergency escort assistance. To anyone monitoring radio traffic, it looked like a humanitarian gesture between military pilots. At 8:47 a.m., the Su-57E touched down at what the pilot believed was a neutral emergency strip. His landing gear rolled to a stop in front of Ukrainian Group 13 Special Forces and a C-130 transport aircraft with its cargo ramp already lowered. The Russian pilot realized what had happened the moment he saw the uniforms. The extraction team worked against a strict timeline. Russian satellite coverage would pass over this sector at 8:58 a.m., giving them exactly 11 minutes to remove the most valuable components before Moscow could identify the aircraft's location. Specialized teams moved in with pre-positioned cutting equipment designed to extract the N-036 Byelka AESA radar system without damaging its internal components. Other technicians collected stealth coating samples from the aircraft's surface, scraping material into sealed containers. The Russian pilot was secured and moved away from the aircraft. At 8:53 a.m., Russian command realized what had happened and scrambled additional Su-35s from Khmeimim Air Base in Syria. The fighters were 280 miles away, approximately 24 minutes out at maximum speed. The C-130 was already airborne with the radar array and coating samples secured in its cargo bay, heading west over the Mediterranean. By 9:02 a.m., the Su-57E airframe sat abandoned at LZ Dagger, stripped of its most valuable components. NATO engineers were already en route to examine the technology. Algeria suspended its remaining Su-57E orders within 48 hours. Russia had lost more than an aircraft. They'd lost the credibility of their entire export program.